Hello and welcome to today's webinar. The subject is Optimizing the Hybrid Cloud, and we have representatives from Amdocs and Microsoft Cloud Fusion who will be talking to us about their collaboration. I'm George Malin, the editor of Vanilla Plus, and I'm delighted to welcome today's panel. With us today we have Dana Cooperson, the Research Director at Analysis Mason. We have Elizabeth Bavin, the Solutions Marketing Manager for Next Generation OSS at Amdocs, and she's joined by Ulrich Eichler, the Business Development Director at Microsoft. I'm now going to hand over to Dana Cooperson to set the scene for today's webinar. Dana, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, George, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Okay, I think we got the first slide up. I wanted to start today's webcast with a look at the broader trends in communication and in the internet world and what's driving initiatives like Cloud Fusion and partnerships such as that between Amdocs and Microsoft. So on the first slide here today, what I'm trying to show is that communications over distance is more critical than ever to our social, public, and commercial interactions. Communications plays a critical role in the overall digital economy. However, communication service providers, or CSPs, cannot assume that they will maintain the central role that they've had over the past decades in providing communications over distance, and particularly for consumer services. There's this whole other world out there in the digital economy, and they really have to work to maintain that central role. So to grow and prosper in the wider digital economy enabled by communications, CSPs have to expand their business models beyond the traditional communication services and find new sources of revenue. They can't cost reduce their way out of the current dilemma whereby internet era companies are outcompeting them in the digital services arena, at least on the consumer side. And the two main vectors of revenue growth that we see going ahead in the future are new innovative communications and media services, so kind of more of what they've been doing but differently, if you will, but then also expanding into new lines of business, things like hybrid cloud, Internet of Things type services, and other digital economy services that depend on and build on communications foundations, so including the converged fixed mobile networks that they've built up and using cloud-based delivery models to take advantage of those assets and their related expertise, but in a new way, in extending their current roles. They have a lot at stake here. Communications service providers have a lot of revenue, about $2 trillion globally last year, and we think that's only going to rise about 1.4% or so to about $2.2 trillion in 2020. They also have a lot at stake on the spending side. CapEx globally is on the order of $357 billion US dollars last year, rising about 1.7%, so faster than their revenues, to about $388 billion in 2020. To harness the new revenue opportunities and support them with the new models of operations, they have to shift investment to three new areas that are required to help them evolve from their current role as communication service providers to prosper in a larger role as digital service providers. So, what is a digital service provider, you may ask, and what are those areas of investment? So to be a digital service provider requires that they involve their businesses in two different directions. And just so, there we go. Okay, I wasn't seeing the actual slide on the screen. So first of all, they have to become a service provider whose operations are digitized. So that's the sort of top left part of the equation that I'm showing here on the slide. So what is operations that are digitalized? Well, that means creating a digital experience when and where and how customers require it. Two, as we've just discussed, they have to expand their offerings from plain communication services to something that extends beyond those to related customer needs that impinge on the wider digital economy. So this could include anything related to cloud-based service delivery mechanisms. It could include IoT service offerings, and the underpinnings here that to these plans to digitize operations and provide the digital services require, and that's the bottom of the equation that I'm showing on the slide, that CSPs update their network infrastructure and their related support systems to enable the digital services and create a much more dynamic, seamless, and automated experience for the customers. This is what customers have actually come to expect from internet-driven web-scale app experiences. So therefore, the network is really the third area of investment on the road from CSP to DSP. The shift to a more web-scale and IT-like network and network support infrastructure requires a lot of new software. In order to shorten the time frame and speed up the CSP to DSP journey, CSPs can avail themselves of professional services in the form of consulting, integration services, hosted managed cloud infrastructure services that can be provided by software vendors and systems integrators. In support of the shift, Analysis Mason forecasts that professional services and software spending will actually increase at double the rate of the overall CapEx spend. So less money spent on hardware and more money spent on software and services. Network virtualization spending specifically, and that includes NFV, SDN, and cloud computing related spending, will actually triple from about $6 billion, albeit a small base last year, to about $18 billion in 2020. Meanwhile, however, there's a whole existing business that CSPs have to continue to support. And it's kind of like, I like to think of the analogy of airlines. So you've got to protect your revenues in your established businesses today. And if you use the airlines as an analogy, you got to keep the planes flying today if you're going to change your business and you're going to change the way you provide services to your customers, add new routes and so on. You still have to maintain the planes. You got to keep your customers happy while you're making the shift. And that's kind of what I'm showing on the current chart is today's business is constrained by investments you've already made and keeping your customers happy today. As you move forward into the future and think about how you're changing your business to support new services, you can start to do new investments and make new decisions and, in fact, form new partnerships. So today we're talking about keeping the businesses going. As you start to digitize your operations, as we showed on the last slide, and have your businesses act more like web scale or internet companies, you still have to focus a bit on efficiency and retention for sure, but then you can think about new ways to monetize customer interaction. So things like location and context-sensitive services and customer self-service ordering. The CSP's core asset will continue to be the network. And the network and how it's operated will have to be fully transformed over the next 10 or 20 years or so. It's going to take a while. And even the most forward-looking CSPs are really only just getting started today in this effort to transform their businesses and their networks. As the CSPs refashion the networks to exploit the new virtualization technologies, the networks will become more able to support these new cloud delivery models and more agile in providing customer services. So to give just one example of some of the modeling work that we've done in business cases, we've quantified billions of dollars in revenue upside and cost efficiencies and gains thereof that can accrue to a CSP through the launch of expanded enterprise services using virtual customer premises equipment and enabled by SDN and NFV. So that's just kind of one example. As the CSP's network and customer support foundations are put in place, they can expand into further digital service offerings, many of which will be aimed at enterprises and small and medium businesses, because that's where CSPs that we talk to see the opportunity, more so than in consumer digital services. And some of our recent research has shown that customization and timeliness are very important to enterprises, more so than with consumers, and that's what we can push with some of the new digitization technologies here. So in closing, Cloud Fusion is a prime example of a win-win. For customers, enterprise customers, they can get a more robust, secure, and easy to use and order service. And for the CSPs themselves, they can move up the value chain and unlock new revenue opportunities they could not economically capture before. George, I think I'll turn it over to you, and I think we have our first poll question.
Yeah, that's right, Dana. Thanks very much for that. Here is the first poll question, which is, where along the continuum shown on the previous slide are you or your customers most engaged today strategically? And the possible answers are running established businesses, digitizing operations, building next-gen networks, or providing digital enterprise services. While you think about that and press the relevant button, I'd urge all of you to view the Q&A panel on your screen. You can always ask a question to the panel, which we will answer at the end. So you can ask that question at any time you want, and I'll present it to the panel at the end of the presentations shortly. So I think we've probably had enough time now to generate some poll results. So I'll move on to the next slide, which should show us the results, which are quite an interesting and level spread. Looking at those results, which we will obviously share later, I'll now pass over to Elizabeth Bavin from Amdocs and also her collaborator, Ulrich Eitler from Microsoft. Elizabeth, over to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, George, and thank you, Dana, for setting the scene for us so well. And looking really at the focus on where are revenues going to come from, how can service providers make sure that they really push themselves up the value chain, and also a focus really on services. And I think from our perspective, when we think about Cloud Fusion and why we have developed this collaboration with Microsoft, part of the kind of raison d'etre for that really is the fact that we see service providers really fighting competition, fighting battles on two fronts around services. The first being that really of customer experience, because customers today, and of course that includes business customers, are used to a very different level of customer experience. I mean, if we think back, there's been a huge amount of change over the last 10 years or so, and if we think back to the arrival of the iPhone in 2007, really since then, service providers have kind of seen their new rivals, if you like, some of the players that you can see on the slide here, chipping away at some of their assets. And to varying degrees, they've lost their hold on devices and on digital content to retailers and over-the-top players. And even you could argue their grip on the network, which was once thought to be pretty unassailable, really. Today, that's starting to face challenges from the likes of Google. But the one asset that the service provider still has and is still holding on to is the customer themselves. And if you like, it's their last untouched asset. It's the one that they really can't afford to lose. And of course, that makes customer experience very, very important. But competing on customer experience is not easy for service providers. In the past, they really would have seen their competition as being other service providers, fighting for subscribers. But today, I think the bar's been lifted to a whole new level. If we think of companies like Uber or Zappos, they're not service providers, but in a sense they're setting the bar that service providers have to reach. And they represent, if you like, the current face, the modern face of customer experience. I mean, if you think about Uber for a moment, they provide an experience that customers absolutely love, and one that I think, in the communications business we can really pay attention to. A customer can order a taxi in just seconds by an app on their phone. They know exactly what it's going to cost them. They know exactly how many minutes away their taxi is. And that means that really today, customers are not going to be happy sitting at home waiting for a service technician to arrive between a window of between 10 and 2, or to sit and wait 5 days for a phone to be delivered. And I think Diane Majors, who's the customer experience executive at AT&T, summed it up really well when she said, customer experience is no longer about the why or the how, but it's about how well. And the other area where service providers really are doing battle is that of services. It's partly about the breadth and depth and richness of services, but it's also, I think, about service agility. And these kind of the threefold challenge of service agility, if you like. Very long service introduction cycles, so we know that it can typically take anywhere from 9 months to 12 months, even as long as 18 months for a complex service to introduce a new service, and that's too long in a competitive market. We also know that service operations, the processes, particularly around complex enterprise services, the deploying and configuring of those services is slow and complex. And of course, there's always pressure on time to market. The market is moving faster, and innovation cycles are getting faster. So we move on to the next slide. This is really where NFV comes in. One of the big promises of NFV is all around service agility, and potentially there are new and innovative business models that come into play here. And what we see on this slide is, and can I just check that we are on slide 11 now? That's what I'm seeing, but I'm not seeing that as live, so I will leave you guys behind the scenes to resolve that for me. But what we're seeing here is that, today, still the enterprise potentially is in a position of just being, well, worst case, dumb pipe, but certainly just providing connectivity. And all the kind of the rich applications, the over-the-top, the value-added services are being provided by the over-the-top providers, the VNF vendors, the cloud brokers. Where service providers want to get to, really, is to capture as much as possible of those value-added services, and to move in the direction of innovation, so that their competition are not eating up the revenue, but service providers themselves are getting into that application and service space. So moving on to the next slide, and I'm on slide number 9 now. There are a number of different potential models that service providers can take when they're delivering enterprise services, and here's the first of those. So, and I think when NFV started a couple of years ago, this was possibly one of the options that people were starting to look at, which is that the service providers start to build their own sophisticated telco cloud. But of course, one of the big challenges here is that requires significant upfront investment in new infrastructure, in data centers, and new operational procedures, new capabilities, and all of that well in advance of the expected growth in enterprise services and revenues. It's very hard to predict exactly when those revenues and when that demand is going to come in, and it's a bit like the good old days of being able to throw a lot of investment at the network, for example, before you know exactly what the capacity demand is going to be. But of course, in the current competitive network, the challenge is that margins are being eroded, and so this kind of upfront investment is not necessarily the ideal solution. So let's consider what other options there are. If we look at the second option, that is that service providers go on doing what they're doing now, what they know best, that they retain their hold on the network in the sort of connectivity and security sense. So they go on providing those VPNs for enterprises and fully rely on the public cloud, so on others to provide that public cloud. But if you like, not only is that a revenue question for the service providers, but actually it's where we run into the kind of question of complexity for the enterprise themselves as well. So, if you think about a typical medium-sized business and a typical IT manager in that business, this kind of scenario expects him to be the one who orders connectivity, who orders the public cloud services, who is responsible for all the kind of configuration, the stitching, the policies, defining and managing the policies. There's a lot of interfaces, there's a lot of potential points of failure. He's got separate vendors, separate networks, separate security, different tools, all of that to manage. And he has to manage the private cloud, the telco cloud, the public cloud, all separately. And it's difficult for him to ensure that solutions are really optimized for business needs and for business critical workloads, and to take into account, the kind of stringent security requirements there might be. There may also be very in certain sectors like financial or health services. The regulatory requirements may also be very strict. It may be that some business critical applications require very low latency, where others it's not so significant. So there's a lot that we would be asking the enterprise to manage in this kind of scenario. So let's reflect for a moment on what's really needed here. There are two views here, aren't there? There's the enterprise view, the end customer view, and then there's the service provider view. So just thinking for a moment about the service provider, what is it they want in this environment, in this current environment? Well, clearly, they want to grab revenues. They want to succeed in this highly competitive market. And so, they're always looking for new revenues, and we know that business customers provide a high growth, high value area for service providers to address. But particularly if they also are the providers of those value added over the top type services. We've talked about service agility. We know that virtualization, network functions virtualization, one of its promises is service agility, that service providers want to be able to innovate much more quickly and to bring new services to market more quickly. And that's partly because that's what their customers are asking of them. And of course, there's always the dollar sign, isn't there? What is it costing to provide these services? How can processes be lower cost while still delivering choice and exploiting the full value of the hybrid cloud? And I think really to look at what the enterprise customer is looking for, I'm going to hand over to Ulrich from Microsoft to give us his insights. So Ulrich, over to you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and happy to take over. So the 4-pointer items or criteria listed on the left-hand side of the slide is something I'll address in the next couple of minutes. Before I do that, let me share why Microsoft has actually decided to work with Amdocs, helping solve that critical problem. One of the things we want to make sure we offer our customers choice. What does that actually mean? As you know, Microsoft is a very partner-centric company, and partnering is an essential part of our go-to-market activities. Just to highlight that, for every single dollar, euro, yen, or British pound, whatever other currency you may think of, we can secure as Microsoft, our customers are actually investing 10 to 12 times that money with our partners who are adding a lot of value and services to our Microsoft product offering. And so we simply want to work with the best in the industry and in each geography to offer our customers the secure, the reliable, and easy way to acquire solutions from Microsoft and our partners. So Amdocs is definitely one of the leading solution and service providers in the communication industry. And the good thing is they are sharing our vision of how cloud platform and technology will become very pervasive in the industry, in the telco industry, but also in the enterprise space. So I think that's a good fit. As you heard from Elizabeth, Amdocs Cloud Fusion supports Microsoft's view of a hybrid cloud environment. And this, we think, will be the de facto reality in the next couple of months or even years. And so it's a good description of how Microsoft, telco, service providers, and enterprise customers will actually work together to each other's mutual benefit. And again, choice is one of the key things. With Amdocs domain expertise and with their Cloud Fusion solution, they will definitely help the service provider industry and become, one of the, let me say, single trusted vendors for telcos and cloud service providers. In moving forward, the next slides will explain why Amdocs, in return, has decided to work with Microsoft versus picking other possible cloud providers in the industry. And let me just go back one slide, please. Thank you very much. So why is the Microsoft Cloud maybe best position of all clouds to actually support that ambition? So let me move ahead here. Starting with cloud. Cloud is most likely one of the most maybe miswords or at least frequently used buzzwords in the industry. There's a lot of competition, definitely, and potentially even more confusion when you consider all of the cloud and platform players in the market today. And so similar to Microsoft, Amdocs really wants to offer their customers, the service providers, the telcos, choice and flexibility, and at the same time really back it up with rock-solid performance and security for the Cloud Fusion solution. So if you take a moment to look at a combination of the three capabilities that you see listed on that slide, we as Microsoft really have identified three to be really critical and where we believe we are in a unique position to help both our enterprise customers and the service provider industry to make the experience be different. Global scale is definitely a key thing. The Microsoft Cloud provides truly worldwide reach and the necessary hyperscale needed to break the cloud entry cost and the barrier with the best economics, the business agility, and the availability we can offer. And we definitely leverage the experience we have gained over many, many years in the enterprise space and have built the largest cloud services in the world. The second criteria that I want to go deeper a little bit later is the enterprise-grade capability, where Microsoft have proven over years that we can really deliver enterprise experience coupled with security and compliance investments, giving service providers and enterprises the confidence that their business demands will be met. The third one, and maybe the most important one, as you heard the term hybrid cloud a couple of times before, I frankly believe, and we in Microsoft are convinced this is the case, that this is our simple biggest differentiator. Everybody believes that it's critical that we provide a flexible cloud services solution with scalability and capacity that will actually leverage and increase the value of existing technology investments today that enterprises and service providers have made to really fit the most urgent business needs. We definitely understand that you can't start over and throw just everything over the fence and say it's now cloud-based. So we can't start overnight. We need the flexibility, the time, and actually the technology when it comes to managing and making the best use of existing on-premise investments and then providing a path to the cloud for everybody's cloud needs. So let's move to the global scale slide and cover that a little bit in more detail. Over the past years, we as Microsoft have built and installed a huge infrastructure to enable us grow our cloud services at scale around the globe. It's key for us to make these upfront investments in the right place for the right geography, but also for the right solutions, and make sure these investments around the world deliver the services in a resilient and reliable fashion when and where they are needed. To give you an idea, today as Microsoft, we have something like 1.6 million servers across something like 100 data centers in 40 countries on the planet. The number continues to grow, so this is not a standstill, but we are growing at a very aggressive rate. This network powers our own Microsoft, but also our partners' applications, and we are committed by service level agreements to ensure a great customer experience and uptime will be met, again, both for enterprises and our partners in the service provider industry. As shown in a previous slide that Elizabeth used, it would require a huge upfront investment for a large number of service providers with a huge risk because the outcome is actually not predicted or predictable. And we do that, or we can do it maybe with a little bit less risk because we already have a huge portfolio of services that run on our platform. And as we serve both enterprise and consumers, we can actually shift workloads. So let's assume one of the big workloads is Office 365, but it could be any business application that enterprises run Monday to Friday. And as soon as we turn, as soon as this is calming down on a Friday afternoon anywhere on the planet, a lot of consumer workloads suddenly get tremendous peak load, such as online gaming, Xbox plays, any other type of social stuff that is sitting on that network. And this is definitely a huge benefit that we can offer, and that helps us to keep prices in a very, very reasonable range, both to service our enterprises, consumers, and service provider customers and partners. If you move to the enterprise-grade stuff, the next slide is already on. An IDC report says that 60% of customers just expect to purchase multiple services from a single cloud vendor. And a cloud vendor could be us, but it could also be, in the terms of the discussion we are having here, the service providers in that industry. Means that cloud vendors have to provide options on multiple services that have a very decent probability of getting these or more businesses into, a successful stage. Cloud services have to meet some fundamental enterprise principles, and they must be secure at all times. They must adhere to privacy principles, in Europe even more than anywhere on the planet in terms of data protection and data privacies. We have to respect policies and requirements that are set up by regulators and customers and public authorities. And the cloud vendor must have viable and clear policies how we conduct their business and share that, in a transparent way with our customers. And using Microsoft Cloud Services, we definitely adhere to that standard, and our customers and partners will definitely benefit. Maybe just a word on what we consider to be enterprise workloads, and Elizabeth listed some of them already. Active Directory is a basic technology, but it's used by over 93% of the Fortune 1000 companies. It's now augmented by Windows Active Directory, for which we have more than 18 billion authentications on a weekly basis, and it's also a growing number. A lot of customers are running Windows servers on-premise, and Microsoft Azure is already used by something like 65% of the Fortune 500 companies. So we have got a very high penetration in that space. The last item I want to use, or a second last, is the data platform. Both on-premise and in the cloud, SQL Server has become one, if not the leading data platform. And, huge success story is definitely the success we had with Office 365, which is the most subscribed cloud service in the world. And to be fair, we couldn't have achieved that number without partnering with a lot of service providers and telcos on the planet. So in every single country, in every single geography on the planet, Office 365 has become one of the value-added services that cloud and service providers actually use to add value to their offering and generate customer retention. Moving to the last one, which is the hybrid story. I quoted IDC before, and another IDC study predicts that 70% of CIOs will just mandate and embrace a cloud-first strategy, but they have to have a path from traditional on-premise and maybe service provider models to a cloud architecture and strategy. We understand the realities of this business, and we have to make sure that options and requirements are met. It was super important for us to provide a strategy to make it easy for organizations to make the move to the cloud on their terms already. And so that includes the development, the management, the identity stuff, virtualization, and other cloud services that have to be included. So the last topic I want to draw your attention to, because that's a key thing for our hybrid story, is what we call the Azure Stack. And that's, rather new, and I encourage everybody to use the link shown in the presentation to get familiar with the details. The Microsoft Azure Stack is the new hybrid cloud platform product from Microsoft that enables your organization, be it an enterprise or be it a service provider, to deliver Azure services from your own data center or from a service provider data center. You can get and can deliver the power of cloud services, but still maintain control of your data center for data, for true hybrid cloud agility. You decide where to keep the data and applications in your own data center as an enterprise with a service provider, or last but not least, in the Microsoft public cloud. It's fully transparent. You can shift workloads from A to B, and Cloud Fusion will definitely be the platform to help you manage that thing and generate new services and make them available to your users. And so only Microsoft offers that kind of capability and flexibility today, and I hope Elizabeth and any other Amdocs person will confirm that has been a key reason to build Cloud Fusion on our platform. In closing, and moving to the last slide, the summary of offerings Microsoft can provide to enterprises and cloud service partners is manifold. And we conducted a study about a year ago with 1,800 customers, enterprise customers in 11 countries. And the findings are quite interesting. 95% of the customers expect to stay with their current primary cloud and hosting provider. So there's a lot of customer retention and loyalty, which I think is great news for the service provider industry. More than 80% of these customers, again, based on the findings we had, have annual or multi-year service contracts, and many of them are planning to add additional workloads, grow their solution portfolio as soon as they will renew or upgrade their contracts with their existing vendors. I think this is the opportunity where Amdocs Cloud Fusion on Azure, on the Microsoft platform, will help the cloud service providers and the telcos to grow your business with your enterprise customers and not get disintermediated. And maybe that's my closing statement, and handing back to Elizabeth.
Great, thank you very much, Ulrich. And I think Ulrich has highlighted very clearly, the kind of breadth and depth and richness that Microsoft and the Azure Cloud Platform bring to this collaboration. Just going back to thinking about the challenges that we started with in terms of customer experience and, service agility and the breadth of services, and the ways in which service providers can look to get more of that value-added revenue for themselves, then having a collaboration with a player like Microsoft is obviously very key. And so we can see here the third of the kind of possible approaches or tactics to addressing some of the challenges around delivering the right services with the right agility and the right customer experience. And that is the hybrid cloud itself, where the service provider has a solution like Cloud Fusion that, if you like, says, if you can't beat them, join them. And Cloud Fusion allows the service providers to really leverage hybrid cloud infrastructure and to provide their kind of meat and drink of connectivity with all the benefits and agility that the public cloud can provide. If we think a little bit more now about what the solution actually looks like, it's a combination of access to Microsoft Azure services, to the cloud platform, and all the Microsoft and third-party applications that are available via Azure, via secure telco networks, and using Amdocs NFV Orchestrator, which is called Network Cloud Service Orchestrator, to streamline end-to-end service lifecycle management. Right from fulfillment to ongoing maintenance, across technologies and across siloed operational platforms. And I'm going to show you a demo shortly of the Cloud Fusion solution. But just to sort of outline what is actually incorporated in that and what you're going to see, the concept of Cloud Fusion beyond the orchestrator and beyond the Microsoft Azure platform also runs across the more traditional sort of BSS and OSS view of the world. It includes, at step one, a self-service portal so that the enterprise themselves can log on and order both connectivity and cloud services, a whole range of applications at the same time. And then there's a process that kicks off, the order fulfillment and the VNF instantiation process, which happens in just a matter of minutes, as you'll see in the demo. And then we close the loop with order notification and billing, so that the service is actually monetized at the end of that. And that process, as you'll see, just takes a matter of minutes rather than sort of weeks that you might expect. And within that, the orchestrator is actually enabling dynamic, near real-time orchestration and instantiation, and even monitoring of the end-to-end service. And that's a key kind of concept in terms of how we see the value of a solution like this, is not just fulfillment itself, but what we call continuous fulfillment in real time, so that the orchestrator continuously evaluates and automatically recalculates any according to differences, and refulfills the service so that the desired state is always in play. You know, when we look at services in general, and in particular when we look at these kind of hybrid cloud services, then a service is a really dynamic entity. It needs to be constantly fulfilled. It needs to be constantly assured. It's not a static one-time deployment, but it needs this continuous fulfillment approach. And services may change through network events, through policy changes. You know, an enterprise might need a service for a specific period of time. They may need lower latency or higher security for a specific project. They may want to move applications from the public cloud to the telco cloud, or vice versa. And of course, bandwidth needs are going to change all the time. You know, if you have more users for a particular application or more branches on your VPN, then you're going to need to scale out the public cloud, as well as increasing connectivity and bandwidth in your firewall, and all the other things that have to be managed when there's any kind of change like that. You'll also see when we come to the demo that there's one of the things that's very key as well, as we'll see on this next slide, is having visibility of the service and network resources, again near real time, at every stage of that continuous fulfillment lifecycle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the demo up. I'm going to share my screen with you. And while I'm doing that, I just want to say, if you have any problems at all with seeing this demo, if it's not resolving properly on your screen, and you can't keep up with the process of me going through the demo, then there is a button on your screen on the right-hand side, and if you press that, you'll find that you can actually get access to the demo for yourself, and I'll talk you through how to move through the demo so that you can follow along in that way if it's easier. So what we're looking at here is we're going to be walking through a demo of the Cloud Fusion solution offering, which combines the telco connectivity with access to the public cloud, and we'll see the role that the Network Cloud Service Orchestrator plays. If you click on the demo, you'll find it takes you to the next screen, which is sort of setting the scene, if you like. It's the story behind the demo. So what we're seeing is an enterprise, a software development company called Double & Co, and the main guy here is Stevie. He's the software team lead. And he has been tasked with addressing the fact that the next release of their software requires them to integrate with a video streaming server. So he and his team have done their due diligence, and they've selected the Wowzer streaming server as being the one that they've chosen to use. And in addition to that, they decide they're actually going to use it on the cloud. And so their existing service provider, NXT, has the solution that they're looking for. They have this Cloud Fusion portal. And, you know, bear in mind that one of the real benefits to this for the enterprise is that kind of single throat to choke approach. So most, if not all enterprises already have a trusted relationship with their service provider. So if actually they can go to their service provider and get not only connectivity, but all the kind of value add cloud-based services as well, with the relevant security associated with it, if they can get that as a bundle from their service provider, then that's typically what they want to do. Stevie then logs onto the NXT, his service provider Cloud Fusion portal. And again, if you click on the arrow on the screen, you'll see it takes you to these 4 steps that the demo will take us through. So we're going to start with looking at the portal. We'll have a look at the kind of fulfillment process, at the notification and billing, and then we'll look at what happens when Stevie then wants to come back and make changes to that order. So again, if you just click on the right arrow to take you to the next screen, this is a typical view of what the Cloud Fusion portal might look like, with lots and lots of different applications in different categories available to the enterprise to choose from. But Stevie knows that he's looking for Wowzer, so he can type that into the search. There is the Wowzer streaming engine, and if you click on the icon of the Wowzer streaming engine, it will take you into the screen here that allows you to configure that instance of Wowzer. And now, because he's going to do some tests with his team first, he only needs a small number of users, so he's going to click on 0 to 50. He only wants to keep it internal at the moment because it's just for testing to begin with, and he only needs it on one of the sites at Philadelphia. He doesn't need it on the second site yet. It won't be available across the company, and so he only needs best effort streaming at the moment. And so because this is integrated with the CRM system and with the catalog, it's clear exactly what he's going to have to pay per month for this instance of the Wowzer streaming engine. So he goes ahead and clicks on buy. If you click on the buy button, it will take you through to this confirmation screen to say, yep, here's what you've ordered, here's how much you're going to pay. Because we're integrated with CRM, the system already knows that you have a Double & Co corporate account that you can use to pay with, and he just clicks on done. And the order is confirmed. So at this point now, we'll see how long it takes to fulfill that order, and you can see there's a timer at the top of the screen. So if you click on the screen again, it takes you back to our steps. We're now going to look at step 2. Click on the arrow, and it will take you so that you can see what do they already have in place at the moment. Double & Co have a site in Jersey, a site in Philadelphia, linked by an enterprise VPN, and they want to link across to the public cloud. So we click on that again, and you can see that if they look into their active inventory, their near real-time inventory, they can see exactly what is in place already in terms of the network and resources and the service. We'll click again, and what we have now is a view of what is going to happen within the NFV orchestrator. And so we have the workflow visible here, and we can see that what the workflow is going to do is it's going to add on the router at the bottom. It's going to add on the Azure gateway, the Azure load balancer, and the instance of Wowzer at the top. And all of that with connection between the two sites via the VPN. Again, if we click, we can see that what the orchestrator is going away to do is to then build that service as ordered by Double & Co, by Stevie from Double & Co. So his router with a firewall is in place to give him secure connectivity across to the public cloud and to his instance of Wowzer. And you can see that all of that has taken just 7 minutes if we look at the timer at the top. If we click again, you can now see the refreshed view in the near real-time inventory, which shows that now the two sites are joined by not just the enterprise VPN, but by the VSRX firewall, and the Azure platform is in place with the Wowzer streaming engine. And all of that is visible in near real-time. And then if we click again, we go back to our steps, and we see that the third step is going to be order notification and billing. So Stevie almost immediately gets an email into his inbox. You can see this is now 9 minutes from when he finished placing his order. And that gives him his service link with his username and password, so he can now, if you click on that link, go straight into Wowzer. He signs in with his username, and again, if you just click on that, it will do it for you. And there he is in the Wowzer engine, and he can start using that with his team. Now the final step, just briefly, is, orders don't stay static, business doesn't stay static, so this enterprise needs to move on. They've done their due diligence, and if we click on that again, we can see this is what they already have in place. and he can now go back into his order. He can see what he has at the Philadelphia site, which includes the streaming engine, and at the New Jersey site, which doesn't include Wowzer. And so he has another opportunity to update his configuration of that order, and this time he's going to take the maximum number of users, he's going to pick the external service ability, and he's going to make it available to everybody in the business. So it's going to be on all the sites and branches, and of course because it's now going live, he'll need to ensure that he's got high quality streaming. And in fact he also has the possibility to ask for bandwidth on demand if this is a very latency critical application, so that you know, he gets bandwidth when he needs it. He sees what he's going to be paying for this new order. He clicks on buy and gets his usual confirmation of payment via the corporate account because of the integration with the CRM. If he clicks on done, he then gets confirmation of his order. And we can then see, again, what is the NCSO going to do, what is the fulfillment process, the automated fulfillment process, and you can see the workflow here. And this time there's 2 instances of the router with firewall, and there are now 3 instances going to be instantiated of the Wowzer streaming engine over the Azure platform. Within, again, a very short time frame, a matter of minutes, all of those are instantiated and connected with the 2 firewalls and the 3 instances of Wowzer. And that again is reflected in active inventory. Again, we can see the 3 instances of Wowzer across the top there, and the 2 instances of the SRX firewall. Again, he gets his confirmation of his order with the updated link. So that's quite a quick view of the Cloud Fusion solution offering, but I hope it brings it to life for you. And if you've had any problems actually seeing that, then after the webinar, do feel free to be in touch, and we'd be very happy to share that with you in an environment where you can look at it in more detail and be sure to be able to see it as we walk through it. So I'm going to close that now and go back to our slides. And really just we're at the summary stage now before we hand over for questions. So I think just looking at slide number 26, we've talked about there being, it's a win-win really, as Dana said right at the very beginning. There's a lot of value for the enterprise in terms of, one trusted vendor to deal with for all the requirements across ordering, billing, and support from the telco for both connectivity, security, and value-add cloud services. As you've seen, delivery is very, very rapid of services, and it can be done in just minutes. Security obviously is very important, and of course, it's optimized use of the hybrid cloud, in terms of what's business critical to be on the private cloud, the telco cloud, and what can be on the public cloud. And then the value to the service provider themselves is really about being competitive and having access to those new revenues by being able to offer enhanced business services through the Microsoft Azure cloud platform, together with orchestration and the BSS and OSS that's available from Amdocs. It's a streamlined process, so it's automated, end-to-end process, very focused on delivering the right customer experience. And of course, as always, there's the economic question. So, this approach allows the service provider to avoid that massive upfront investment, and even to do kind of data center over-dimensioning by being able to use the hybrid cloud, the public cloud. And finally, just to summarize really before we hand over to questions, From a CSP perspective, the key goal is how do we allow you as a CSP to create new revenue opportunities, to join with the really huge competitors and, to become trusted partners, to move up the value chain, not just to be a dumb pipe, but to offer an end-to-end application, to be an end-to-end application provider with very significant service agility. And if you do want any more information on the Cloud Fusion solution, then you can see on this slide, if you go to our partner site and look at the Cloud Fusion page, you'll find more detail there. So I think with that, I'll hand back to George.
Great, thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was a really good demo. I always find a demo helps explain the benefits much better. Thanks also to the audience who have sent in a series of questions. We've got time for a few questions still, so that's good. One question that we've had in, which I'd like to direct to Ulrich, would be a question about whether he can provide a bit more detail on the security and reliability features of the Cloud Fusion proposition. So Ulrich, can you provide some more detail on the security and reliability features of Cloud Fusion?
So
I think
I think that's rather a question for Elizabeth than for me. Elizabeth.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's always hard to know where to direct questions that come in.
No, let me pick that up. That's fine. I think there's a couple of things to say about that. So in our collaboration, obviously security has been a big issue to be addressed because it's very important to enterprise customers. So what we do with Cloud Fusion really is extend the enterprise's VPN, which is provided by the service provider, to Azure, to the virtual network, if you like, via an IPsec tunnel. Cloud Fusion is really relying on intranet access, the VPN, if you like, rather than on just a standard internet-based solution. So therefore, by its very nature, really, it's private infrastructure. I think that probably hopefully addresses the question.
Okay, excellent. We've got another question, which I think is probably going to be for you again, I'm afraid, Elizabeth. The question is, what breadth of support does Amdocs provide to the CSP in implementing Cloud Fusion? And actually, there's a second part to that question, which I guess will be Ulrich's part, which is what support does Microsoft provide?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things to say. I mean, I suppose, first of all, our NFV orchestrator, the Network Cloud Service Orchestrator, really just by its very nature, it provides a platform for creating automatic assurance capabilities, which are kind of based on if-then models. We also provide an offline design tool, which is designed specifically to enable service providers to very quickly onboard and model new VNFs and combine them together to make new services, and to do the kind of validating, testing and introduction of new services via that offline tool. Although also we provide professional services to do that too, for service providers who want help with the whole onboarding and service modeling piece. And then, of course, I mean, Amdocs, like Microsoft, is a global vendor, and we provide worldwide follow-the-sun support and also consultancy services, of course. Ulrich, I don't know if you want to add anything from a Microsoft.
I couldn't have said it better, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, which I think might be one for you, Ulrich. I'm not 100% sure, though. It says, as an enterprise, what do I need to have in place in order to take advantage of the self-service ordering features of Cloud Fusion?
I would say I think the Cloud Fusion solution is basically the tool for the service provider. And I don't know the solution well enough to really say this is what I have to have in place in terms of application functionality, besides the fact you should have a clear understanding which kind of solutions you would like to have provisioned by your service provider. And, Elizabeth, does the portal actually is it exposed to the enterprise customer, or is it entirely handled by the service provider?
I think in a way the answer is very simple. Yeah, absolutely. So the portal is available to the enterprise themselves, so they order what they need via that portal, and that can have open to them a very rich and diverse set of applications and connectivity services. And really the only thing the enterprise needs to do is to be an enterprise customer of the service provider, and therefore have a VPN with the service provider. And all the rest is managed by that collaboration of the service provider with Amdocs Orchestrator with Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds good. So I was interested earlier on, Elizabeth, that you spoke about the differences between the public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. What cloud services and applications do enterprises typically want to access on the public cloud?
I think that's a great question, and I think without being slopey-shouldered, I think that's probably a really good question for Ulrich to address.
Yeah, I would like to do that. So I think we have to differentiate a little bit, George, by geo and industry. So there might be geographies where you can run a totally different set of applications, from the public cloud than in other. If you think about regulated markets such as the financial services industry, or the one that is very, very sensitive about personal identifiable data such as medical, I think you will have to have a very deep consultation with regulators, maybe even public authorities, what kind of applications you would like to place in the public cloud without, getting in conflict with existing laws or regulations. In general, a starting point has always been, and that's something I mentioned in my presentation, start with, workloads that are enterprise grade, such as Office 365, for example, which is maybe a very good practice on, how such an activity can start. You can add other solutions, think about Skype Enterprise for voice, telephony, data, instant messaging, and other things. You can then think about actually enterprise applications that are non-regulated, that could be a CRM system, that could be even an ERP system, that could be, other kind of business solutions. And I think that's a phased approach that we have seen in many, many cases enterprise taking. And now they have that great opportunity to, work with their service provider to figure out which is, quote unquote, their portfolio already, which they can instantiate and integrate or add by working with Amdocs and Microsoft. And that would be maybe a typical path to start a journey.
Okay, thank you, Ulrich. That's very interesting. There's still time to take questions from the audience. We've got a few more minutes left before the session ends. Any questions that we can't answer in the time we have available, we'll be able to come back to answer you. So do feel free to get your questions in because there's still time. I've got a question. I'd like to bring in Dana if that's possible, because I'm really interested to see how a company like Amdocs is working with a company like Microsoft to enable this to happen. Do you think that's a pattern that we will see more and more in terms of collaboration to make hybrid cloud services a reality, Dana?
Yes, George, I do, and I think it's because of all the things we've talked about during today's webcast. I think there's a question of how much money does one carrier want to spend implementing something that's actually already been implemented very well by another player. That's one thing, and I just think that people are looking around and are creating partnerships because they're just, in general, in this market, realizing they just shouldn't and can't do everything themselves. So as cloud services become more important, I do believe we'll see more of these specific types of partnerships in the market.
Great, thank you. I think We probably don't have any more time left, so it falls to me to say thank you very much, Dana Cooperson, the Research Director at Analysis Mason, for participating in today's webinar. Also thanks to Elizabeth Bavin, the Solutions Marketing Manager for Next Generation OSS at Amdocs, and last but not least, Ulrich Eichler, the Business Development Director at Microsoft. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and I think it shows some very interesting future directions for our industries and in fact probably for the way we live and work. So many thanks to all the speakers and also to the audience for attending the event. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.